So when is a Roman road not a Roman road? The answer is when it's a river. My first video in this series, the one with the really bad sound, because we all have to start somewhere, talked about the relationship between Roman roads and rivers. It showed that where you get a Roman road crossing a significant watercourse, you will likely also get a roadside settlement. For example, this series of settlements near Southampton in Hampshire. One of the reasons for this is because it's essentially a crossroads. In the Roman period, boat traffic was much more important than today, because it was much more efficient to transport bulk goods by water than by road. It's only recently that this has changed, with modern roads and lorries. The Industrial Revolution in Britain saw the construction of thousands of miles of canals for the transport of bulk goods such as coal. Canals in Britain didn't start in the Industrial Revolution, but in the Roman period. Things were different back then though. No locks, for example. Let's take a look at what we currently know about canals in Roman Britain. The story starts in Lincolnshire and Cambridgeshire with William Stukely. He had noticed what he considered to be a canal, built in the Roman period running along the west side of the Fens, known as the Car Dyke. This was in two parts, though he considered they were once part of a single whole. The larger part ran 93 kilometres from Peterborough to Lincoln and became known as the Lincolnshire Car Dyke. The second, much shorter part led northwest from Waterbeach in Cambridgeshire and became known as the Cambridgeshire Car Dyke. They were in fact two completely separate entities. We are going to start with the larger part in Lincolnshire. Here we're at the southern end at Peterborough, where the Lincolnshire Car Dyke joins the River Nene. The feature is well preserved here, and you can see that it hugs the edge of the Fenland, so it is almost, though not quite, level on its journey. It sticks to that format along its entire length between Peterborough and Lincoln, and would make taking goods by boat across that distance viable. The Romans had cleverly made use of the edge of the fen to construct a canal across a long distance that didn't require locks, unlike modern canals. The trouble is, not all archaeologists agree with that. First, the dating of the feature has not been particularly clear. The general consensus is that it is Roman, but for a potentially important route, there is not much in the way of Roman settlement along its length. One thing in its favour is this earthwork cutting the course of the Car Dyke. It's described by Phillips as not later than the Middle Ages. The second point of disagreement is not about the date. Much has been written on the Lincolnshire Car Dyke since Stukely, and not everyone agrees it is a canal. Phillips initially agreed with Stukely that it was a canal, but in the late 1970s, Simmons, Pryor and Solway then published material suggesting that Car Dyke was instead a catchwater drain, protecting the Roman salt production in the Fenland to the east from flooding by directing rainwater from higher land to rivers to the north and south. The evidence against it being a canal was that it was found not to be completely flat, being raised somewhat in the centre, and there was a Roman period causeway of unexcavated material across it, which would mean that boats would not be able to pass. A dissenting voice was Longhurst, who pointed out the banks of excavated material either side of Car Dyke were set back from it, so that a canal side path was available for working animals to pull boats. He didn't properly deal with the points against it being a canal, so the prevailing consensus remains that it's a catchwater drain, and I agree with that. Before we move on to the Cambridgeshire Car Dyke, it's worth mentioning a further feature that Stukely considered a Roman extension of the Lincolnshire Car Dyke. After Car Dyke reaches the River Witham, which passes the Roman town at Lincoln, there is another ancient canal connecting the River Till to the River Trent. This would have allowed both traffic between the towns of Lincoln and York. This feature is known as foss dyke, and this one would not make sense as a catchwater drain. There hasn't been much investigation of this feature, as it's still in use as a canal. It's dated to the Roman period by a single find, but what a find! This statuette of Mars was found near Torksey, where the canal joins the River Trent. Despite this, there isn't a complete consensus on whether or not the foss dyke is Roman, although historical records show it's at least as old as the 12th century. Now to the Cambridgeshire dyke. It's now known as the Old Tillage, as Stukely's supposition that it once joined to the Lincolnshire dyke has been dismissed. Here we see the southeast end, where it joins the River Cam. Unlike the Lincolnshire dyke, this is clearly Roman and clearly a canal. There is Roman settlements and finds along most of its length, and modern excavations where the canal joins the River Cam have revealed significant Roman settlement and dated the construction of the canal to the rule of the Emperor Hadrian. The settlement came before the canal though, and is widespread on both sides of the River Cam. This is the centre of a Roman pottery industry known as the Horningsea industry. Further to the west, near the River Great Ouse, Roman settlement was excavated and part of it was preserved as a result. This gives us some idea of what has been lost to ploughing. If we take a wider look at the canal, its purpose becomes more clear. It connects the River Cam and the River Great Ouse to make travel between the two easier, so bulk goods could have moved between the Roman settlements at Cambridge and Godmanchester, or as the locals call it, Gumster. Yeah, really. As the settlement at Waterbeach, along with its pottery production, already existed when the canal was built, was that just a means of moving the pottery west? Apparently not, as pottery distribution suggests that it was mainly sold north and south along the length of the River Cam, and that Gumster was mainly serviced by other pottery industries. Before we discuss further possible canals in the Fens, it's worth discussing how the Fenland appears today on LiDAR. This will allow us to recognise something man-made in contrast to what we would expect. Much of the Fens is reclaimed land, originally salt marsh or even sea. The process of reclamation has left certain patterns in the landscape. The wide channels that once permeated the marsh are now rather counterintuitively raised above the surrounding land. These channels contained silts, which ended up harder wearing than the surrounding organic material in the marsh, which collapsed when the water was drained and was more susceptible to wind erosion, leaving the channels up to a metre higher than the surrounding land. This same effect can be seen in some Roman canals that are found in the marsh rather than cut across dry land around the edge of the fens. Back to the west of the Old Tillage, or the Cambridgeshire dyke, depending on what you want to call it. Near the village of Erith is one of those Roman canals that now shows as a raised line, though now somewhat damaged by modern disturbance. To the southwest of it, from Erith to Somersham, is Roman occupation along slightly higher ground. The canal may seem to end suddenly here, but appearances can be deceptive. The line of this canal gives boat access from the adjacent settlement to an old watercourse to the southeast. It's not the modern drainage you can see cutting a straight line to the northeast on the LiDAR, but something more sinuous. Southwest of the letter X on the map is the River Great Ouse. North of the letter X is the curving original river course. Between X and Y is where the river currently drains, but this is clearly an artificial cut, being roughly straight and cutting through higher ground. East of the letter Y we are back to the natural watercourse, originally a minor branch of the River Cam, but now considered to be part of the River Great Ouse. The question is the section between X and Y Roman? If it is, it would have given access from the River Cam to the River Great Ouse and the settlements around Erith. It would make sense that it is Roman, otherwise the old tillage would have gone nowhere. I have highlighted the old river courses in orange. Modern drainage to speed the flow of the water has meant that the old river courses have now dried up. Now we can see the old course of the River Great Ouse. We can see that a Roman could have travelled from Gumster, passing the Erith to Somersham Canal, and continued on to the Roman fort at Grandford on the Fen Causeway. More on the Fen Causeway later. Likewise to the east, the River Cam gave access from the settlement at Cambridge, passing the potteries at Waterbeach and the adjacent canal to the northwest, passing the settlement at Littleport, and again on to the Fen Causeway. It has been supposed that Roman Road 23B, leading to Littleport, continued on to the north, but there is no sign of that, and it would have made much more sense for the river itself to have been a continuation of that route rather than a road. It's not just the long distance routes we're looking at, there are shorter routes heading into the fens. To the west, near the Roman settlement at Bourne, are two possible canals heading east from the Lincolnshire Car Dyke. These can't be back draining into the Lincolnshire Car Dyke, as the water would have to travel uphill. They don't seem to travel very far, and there isn't much sign of Roman salt working at the end, so identifying them as a canal is not clear either. Their purpose is a mystery for the moment. Similarly, on the eastern side of the fens, near Watlington, there is a confirmed Roman canal once again heading west into the fens, known as the Aylmer Canal. It's not linked to any other Roman period canal or drainage, and this time there are large-scale traces of salt working associated with it. There are three types of features visible here. At A, there is a series of large globular features raised above the surrounding area. At B, there are a series of parallel linear features, and at C, a series of cross-hatched features, all of which we will see at other sites later on in this talk. The largest feature that crosses the centre of the fens is known as the Fen Causeway, a Roman road that crosses west to east. Here at the western end, it starts at the Roman town at Warton Newton, just to the west of Cambridgeshire. Warton Newton is on the River Nene, which the southern end of the Lincolnshire Car Dyke drains into. The original course of the River Nene was further to the south than today. It has now been rerouted via modern drainage channels. It also once joined the original course of the River Great Ouse. The east-west line of the Fens Causeway started by following the line of the River Nene before turning to the north and heading for a crossing on the original River Great Ouse. Of course, where you get a road crossing a river, you get a settlement, and the Romans built a fort and associated settlement at Grandford, near March. The site, with its fort and surrounding settlement, dates from the 1st to the 4th century, with a period of abandonment in the 3rd century, when a major flooding event wiped out the site. This is the sort of event that the construction of the Lincolnshire Car Dyke was built to suppress, as far as the salt workings of the fens were concerned, but it may be that the additional water being redirected down the River Great Ouse past this site that contributed to its temporary demise. The road then makes a turn to the southeast to stay on an area of land raised over the surrounding marsh, on which the modern town of March sits. It reaches another river, one that no longer exists, where there is more settlement at Flagras. The road here is supposed to continue to the east, but I disagree. There is supposed to be a road and canal side by side, but I found no details of the excavation of the road. I personally think that it continued purely as a canal for a time. The most important thing to understand here is that the road turning it into a canal would have served two purposes. It would have allowed the road to continue across what would have been the boggiest part of its journey, and it would also have provided a connection for boats between the River Cam and the unknown river near March. The area was certainly busy during the Roman period. There is significant Roman settlement on slightly raised ground at Stonia, and various canals leading to that from the north, east and west. There is also a reappearance of the salt working features we saw on the eastern edge of the fens. At A we have a large raised globular feature, at B we have the parallel linear features, and at C we have the cross-hatched features. Finally, as the canal reaches the River Cam and slightly higher ground, the road resumes with a turn to the north and east. The road then continues to join up with the road network in Norfolk. Those of you who know about Roman roads may be asking yourself, where's the Icknield Way? Personally, I don't think that's very Roman and shouldn't be included as a Roman road. On the subject of water, let's head further to the north, where the sea enters the Fenland between higher ground at Norfolk and Lincolnshire. These two coastal settlements at Burr-le-Marsh and Holme next the sea wouldn't make a lot of sense unless you draw the line of a ferry crossing between them. At least the Romans didn't have to dig a canal for that one. So there we have it, the area we have been looking at today: Lincolnshire, Cambridgeshire and Norfolk. The Romans certainly weren't shy about making use of water, to the extent that large engineering projects were built to make use of it, or to guard against it. Thank you for listening to my talk, and see you for the next one.